everybody, welcome back to the Creator Shelf. And yes, you're joining me on a cold, drizzly evening in Brussels. But yes, welcome back to those who already know me and welcome to new subscribers. So for today's topic, I do at the end of every month a review on a deck that I've been using for the month, throughout the whole month. And for this month, I'm going to be looking at the Darkwood Tarot. So here it is. So this is a mass market deck by Llewellyn. It is by Sasha Graham. The art is by Abigail Larson. As I recall, Sasha Graham is also the author of The Haunted House Tarot by Llewellyn. Scarabia, Llewellyn. So anyway, I absolutely love the Tarot of the Haunted House. Before everybody asks, like, what is she referring to? It is this deck over here. This deck I absolutely adore. I have only been working with it for the last few months. I got it in August. I've kind of like just been working with it in October actually, but I love this tarot deck. I think it's going to be one of my favorite tarot decks of all time. And yeah, it's by Sasha Graham as well, but the artist is different. However, for this month's deep dive basically that I did, it was the Darkwood Tarot. And as many of you already know, I kind of like do a monthly dive into a Llewellyn box deck. I have no idea why Llewellyn box deck specifically. I think it's just become a bit of like a trend that I've latched onto. And next year I'm thinking already of like switching it up and doing perhaps a deep dive into an indie deck and then a mass market deck and switching between the two. Perhaps that's of interest to the community, but I think I like doing a deep dive into a mass market deck because of its affordability and its accessibility, especially given the fact that during this pandemic, I know it's been hard to be able to access decks which are basically not available worldwide, while this you can buy from Amazon or Book Depository or from your local regional outlet as well. So it's very highly available and easily accessible. It retails, now let me have a good look here. So in the US, it's $32, which I think I bought it for like, I bought it with a little bit of a discount, but I think I bought it for like 22 euros. And so, I don't know, 20 pounds, 25 pounds, I don't know. But yeah, that's like the rough cost of the deck. And I kind of like picked it up in July this year. So this deck was released back in June 2020, as I recall, June or July 2020. And I knew that there was like a lot of fuss about it. The artist Abigail Larson is well known within her community. I've been looking at her website. I think there's a graphic novel that she's just recently done some artwork for and is due to be released. I know also she's won a lot of awards. Well worth checking out her website. You know, absolutely stunning images. And as I've mentioned before, I also like Sasha Graham's work because I love Tarot of the Haunted House. So yeah, so I picked up this deck and I just knew that I was going to do a month dive into it, and I thought October would be a great month given the whole run up to Halloween or Samhain or however you want to say it. And yeah, so let me start going through the things that I picked up when working with this deck. Now, first of all, like a lot of the Llewellyn decks, it comes with this really large guidebook, fully in depth, and what you have here is basically, sorry about this, hold on, let me put this over here. What you have here is basically, and by the way, my cat is right next to me, that's why, like, you see me petting him, but he's like, give me some cuddles while you're there. But anyway, so as you can see, this is a full guidebook, and we have in here for each of the cards, a really in-depth, let me get to a card here. Let me just get to a card here. For example, for the Hermit, we have an in-depth overview of what Sasha Graham's thoughts are. Then we have meaning, and then we have the shadow side as well. So really in-depth information. And she does the same again for each of the mine as well. So here is the Ace of Cups. And again, a lot of depth for each card, very well written out, fully colored, illustrated guidebook. So yes, so this is kind of like a lot of the standard Llewellyn stuff these days when it comes to these large box decks. Hence also the price tag, why it's a little bit more expensive than the kind of like just the smaller tarot decks. But yeah, I think the guidebook is absolutely awesome. I'm about to go into why in a moment. Let me get the cards out. Now, first of all, the cards are absolutely, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep saying stunning, but The cards are really, really good. I don't know if the camera is doing it here justice, but you can see here it's a little bit grainy, but the cards are really, really beautiful. Each of the suits has its own symbols, of course. You know, we have the pentacles, the wands, the cups, and the swords, but they've been done with their own kind of like representations within the deck, and it's just a beautifully beautifully illustrated deck. I have edged mine in black. It's slightly faded, which I think is perfect actually. And these are the backs. So yeah, it's a really, really well-known deck, and I'm sure you can find many walkthroughs of it. For me, what I did was I did kind of like a pull of 2 or 3 cards every day. I was working with the whole Connect with Your Deck Facebook group, so just like answering questions from those prompts that's put there by Elizabeth on Connect with Your Deck, and just kind of like answering them. But mostly I just use the prompts as kind of like a starting marker, or like just a signpost. I'm more intrigued by just what the cards are showing me, and sometimes, of course, I always have it that the energies of the cards then show up in the day, or at least one of the cards I kind of like link it to something in the day. And I kind of like keep it light, because otherwise it can become very, very heavy doing a pull every day and going to some in-depth spread. What I personally absolutely loved about this deck was that the guidebook itself, and I want to go into that, is the meanings for each of the cards was very well done. But what I appreciated, and I had this as I worked throughout the guidebook, was that the author, Sasha Graham, actually does a whole story. So as we go through the journey in the Dark Wood, we're actually following a storyline, not just this is what the card means. And I really, really, I really appreciated that. I appreciated the thought that was put into the guidebook. The other thing I realized actually when I was pulling cards every day was, and this is kind of like a learning for me, was that this deck in particular, now I've already done kind of like reviews of the Green Witch, the Everyday Witch. What else have I done? I've done the Dreaming Way. I've done several monthly reviews now. But what I found for the first time ever with this particular deck was that the more I did daily pulls, the more I realized that I wasn't actually doing the deck much justice. And the reality was that the guidebook has been so well written that I felt like this deck would be lent better to a practice of perhaps a spread or a more in-depth dive reading. And by the way, something I forgot to mention at the beginning of this video was that I have recorded all of this and done this not having seen any reviews since June or July, because I wanted to have as much neutrality as possible. So I know some other tarot tubers have also done recently reviews, which I think will probably be great. So whatever I'm saying, I'm not sure if it's lining up with what others have said. It's just my own experience to try and make it as neutral as possible. I didn't look at other reviews after I bought the deck. But my personal experience with this has been that there was so much that I could have reaped from each card, and especially when I was starting to lay out 2 or 3 cards, the way that it has been done, it really is a storybook deck. I think it lends better and greater weight if you need to pull, let's say, 5 or 6 cards. If you're following a spread, or like me, I don't really do spreads. I just lay them out. Sometimes they're in some kind of a pattern, sometimes they're not. I don't even myself know what I'm going to do until I start to actually work with the question and the querent, and then it just happens. So for me, the more I work with this deck, the more I thought I would love to have done this actually, more as like a connecting with it as a deck for larger readings, basically. So that was the first thing. The other thing that I kind of like loved was the colors. Now, unfortunately with my camera you can't see it too well, but the actual color is very, very neutral. It's like these soft browns, grays, and then there's a pop of red and some white, of course, and so forth. But what I absolutely loved was that the cards, the atmosphere and the light in the sky that's depicted is very much in that twilight liminal space kind of feeling. Like here you can really see it here, and I absolutely fell in love with that. I love the fact that we weren't really in the dark, we weren't really in daylight, we were somewhere in between, and we didn't, I almost felt when I was looking at the cards was I didn't know if it was night or day actually. And I loved it. I loved it for that. I loved it for its disorientation in time. The other thing is, and I can see it with this card specifically, is I absolutely love the body positions in that Abigail Larson has done in this deck. The body positioning is almost a story in itself, and it's very, very clever. A lot of the depictions of the art I find are angular. There's a lot of horizontal art and then vertical lines, but of course cleverly done. You know, this is not the Wild Unknown or anything like that. This is completely different kind of graphic art. I'm not an expert in it, but what I really noticed was sometimes how the bodies were contorted. Sometimes it was very classic, like this is a very classic position, but sometimes, you know, there was this juxtaposition of the body in terms of either here you can see she's thrusting forward, here you can see kind of like the hunchback over, and yeah, I mean this deck in terms of its body imagery was really profound. Now I think sometimes people would say that there's a lack of body diversity, and I would agree to it to a certain extent. There is a certain extent lack of body diversity, and I do think there's a certain extent lack of diversity in terms of persons of color. For sure, I kind of like did have that feeling a little bit here, but I don't think it's not as much as what I've seen with other decks, to be quite honest with you. So I'm somewhere in between on this one. In terms of the bodies though, what struck me personally was that it had a lot of angular contorted, as I've said, contorted imagery, and I really liked it. I like the fact that sometimes that's more classic. These are some of the classic ones, but I'm going to start getting to it where some of the images were just the way that the body was positioned really, really struck me. Now she's back to that horizontal position, and I think there was a theme at some point where I kept seeing the protagonist, to an extent, her lying on her back, either pierced or asleep or in a slumber, and it really got me thinking about sleep. This deck had something to do with not being fully conscious, not being fully awake. I don't know what it was trying to get at. So again, this goes back to the fact that I think this deck actually, for me, I need to revisit it for more depth in terms of readings fully actually. So yeah, I was really, really surprised. Now I'm going to kind of like come soon to the cards that I absolutely loved in this deck, and I've kind of like put them here at the back. But here are some of the cards, and let me get to them now. See, I love this one, this page of wands. But here we have it now. Not justice so much, right? Or well, that reminds me of Maleficence actually. But where do we get to? Where do we get to it? Right. First of all, I loved it. The fact that the Fool is a female Fool. I absolutely love that. You know, we just don't have enough of that, so that was great. I absolutely adored the 10 of Cups in this deck. I love wolves, and yeah, I just really, really loved it in this deck. It just really captured a family coming together, yet very primordial for me, very wild, very instinctual. Yeah, just that howling of the moon, but just in such a beautiful, like a familial way. So yeah, I really loved that. I loved the Hangman or the Hanged Woman. Or if you read the guidebook, it's something else actually, but I loved it in this deck. I mean, I don't want to spoil it for those who have not worked with this deck but want to work with this deck, but there is such a fantastic storyline in this. So yeah, I really loved it. I loved this card. Now this is the Two of Swords, and if you look at it, you've got the shadows, but if you look actually in the reflection, there are no shadows. There's no woods actually. So which one's real? And it's almost like it harks back to, you know, what is she got going on in her mind, or what do I have going on in my mind, which is real and what's not real. So yeah, loved the Seven of Cups here. I really like it when the artist actually shows all the cups with their different options. I know I've seen so many times Seven of Cups where the artist doesn't do the dragon, the wreath, the ghost, you know, all the different options coming out of the cups. And I really don't like that actually. It's a bugbear of mine. And I say why, because that is, for me, that's part of the essence of the card. So it's almost like it gets stripped away of some of the most important parts of it. So I really appreciated the fact that the artist had done that. Love the Nine of Wands here, really creepy, and just really shows us, like, you know, what am I kind of like, you know, prepared for? It's that last battle, but who's gated? You know, is it me that's gated, or is it that creepy figure gated? Love the Hierophant as well, and I'll tell you why, because in this whole card we have that snake. And as I go further on, okay, so this is the Sun, absolutely. See, normally I'm not a huge fan of the Moon cards and the Sun cards in a deck, and the Sun card in this. I got this card so many times in the month that I was reviewing the deck, and it really actually made me like the Sun card. I really like that it's not a naked baby, it's a naked woman. We're fully adult in this, and she's leaving behind her past in that garden, and we're really into that present, you know, in front of the garden. So, love the Two of Wands, to be prepared. Here we are, the Three of Wands. Very interesting. Now, the Moon card was my favorite card in the whole deck, because I really felt when I first drew this card, you know, when I was doing a pull one day, I really felt the energy of her rising out of that lake, or maybe she's going into the lake. I don't know which way. It depends on how you want to read it, but I just loved it. Instead of a crab, we have the protagonist, right? And like I said, I'm not usually a fan of the Sun card and the Moon cards in the deck, but this deck made me like those cards. And I actually love her body in this. I love that, some might say, oh, it's a lack of body diversity, but I actually love the angular positions. There's something about it, yeah, I'm very, very drawn to. I loved the Emperor in this because of that bright orange hue of that. Like I said, are we in sunset? Are we in sunrise? Are we going towards night? Or this deck is just phenomenal in that sense. So yeah, here's the Eight of Swords, and I really find this card in particular very daunting because the noose is around her neck. The Chariot, beautiful, beautiful cards. And this is one of the cards that I absolutely love from this deck. It's the Eight of Cups, and it's those snakes weaving their way through. Now, the Eight of Cups for me, even though it's not a Scorpio card, the Scorpio cards actually sit in the middle. But the Eight of Cups for me still just that snake energy of weaving its way through and moving on. It's moving on. Is just, I love it, you know. So unfortunately I need to get more light in for today, but let me see if I can improve this. Hold on a second. I think that might improve it a bit. Yeah. So as you can see, you know, I love the fact that in the Six of Wands we have a woman victorious. I love that. And there we go. And here's the Five of Cups. And what I love about this card is, you know, of course, she's coming back with her prey. So this deck in particular just really, you know, it kind of like, it's the first time for me, well, you know, I think, what is it now? I've gone through about, this year I must have gone through working with at least 10, 15 decks, really, because I can go through, like, let's say, like I go through a deck every 2 or 3 days if I really wanted to, but I like to really sit with the deck for a bit. So that means I can't go through so many decks in one go. And this is like one of the first decks where I didn't bond with it immediately, but it's almost like the deck made me work for her. I don't know how else to say it, but I really had to just work with it and sit with it, and I couldn't do a superficial gloss, and this deck demanded it. It said, no, This is not superficial time. This is when you pay attention to me. And I like that. I like the fact that it was a bit sassy in that sense. Would I recommend it? Absolutely. Would I recommend it for a beginner? I have a question mark there. I think if one is a beginner, maybe so. Yeah, because there's a lot of Rider-Waite-Smith imagery in here. Some people call this a shadow deck. Again, as you probably know from my channel, I no longer understand this whole shadow thing. For me, this is a deck that just, it covers everything. It covers us, you know, that beautiful, you know, if we go into something like the Five of Pentacles, you know, feeling left out, feeling like, you know, we're out, you know, in the poor, we're not having access to that money, we're in a very cold, hard place. That's part of life, I think, in many different ways. I never always think about that as just money. I think about that as also isolated from family and friends. I think about that isolated maybe from our own faith, isolated from our neighborhood. So for me, you know, this whole thing about shadow, like I go back to it, this deck is just phenomenal all the way around. It shows me appreciation. It shows me, you know, the ability to create. Look at that magician over here. It shows me, you know, it shows me that I can light my way through any tunnel. You know, she's lighting her way through. She doesn't need anyone else. So it's a very empowering deck for me. It's not just looking at those things which I might be struggling with. It's also giving me guidance and ideas and pointers to go forward. And as I've already mentioned, the guidebook I personally think is very, very good. So those were my thoughts around the Darkwood Tarot. Let me just check a little bit. So one of the drawbacks that I find for this particular deck, now this is not to do with the artist actually, but when I got the deck, the thing that I really was disappointed in is the cardstock, which I'm going to mention now. This has got to be the first Llewellyn deck where I know people have complained about cardstock of Llewellyn decks. Most of the time I'm fine with it, I'm okay. I don't think it's that bad. But this is the first time where I was like, no, I can see why people complain about Llewellyn cardstock. This deck came fully sealed from the factory. I could tell just by looking at it, just by touching it, that nobody else had touched it. It wasn't like a return from somewhere else or anything like that. And as I looked through the cards were chipped. Yes, the cards were chipped around the sides. And I could see that was to do with quality straight out of the factory. And I want to be open about that. That was a disappointment for me. That was like, how can I be receiving chipped cards and this is from the factory? That was one. So what I've done is I've edged my deck in black, and when I did the edging, it actually covered up a lot of that imperfection. And I don't know how, some people talk about this, that when we edge decks, it helps with their longevity. And I think that in this case, yes, for sure. Edging it has made it a little bit more proof to that chipping. I don't know how the chemistry of that works, but that's true. So, you know, I think that was one of the drawbacks. And it was the first time ever where I felt annoyed. I felt annoyed that at the price point that it is, yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be for any price point, right? We should have policy. But really, when we're looking at like a $30 deck, and what I've seen in the US, the indie decks are around, what, $50 on sale? Sorry, $60 on sale. I've seen decks around $50, $60 on sale, indie decks. I don't quote the price that we have in Europe because of the whole shipping and taxation. Indie decks here are just enormously expensive, so I'm not going to even quote those prices. But for a US deck to be $32 full priced, and I think indie decks would be on sale full price maybe $60, so double the amount. But the difference in like a $30 deck, $32 deck, it shouldn't come chipped, right? So yeah, that's one of the bugbears I had. The other thing that I heard about this deck, which I think it could have benefited from, and it's kind of like my own personal thought about this, was I think that the borders in a way kind of like captured the card, but if it had been made borderless, I think the cards could have shown a continuity and a spread even better. And I kind of like started to note that if we had no border, but I mean the border is not so intrusive, but if we had no border at all, it would have the seamlessness even further. But that's my own personal kind of like taste basically. So some people might say that doesn't bother us actually. But yeah, I don't want to say too many negative things. I think the artwork is really taste. So some people will love this, some people will be like, not my thing. I can understand that. This is kind of like artwork, which for me just, it sits somewhere in the middle. It's not my favorite, but at the same time, it's not that I dislike it. I don't know how else to put it. I did watch some reviews from the goth community, because a couple of goth people, they'd actually, their channels are more around just goth life, and I don't know how else to explain it, but a few of them had, one or two had bought this deck and then reviewed it. So I'm not sure they're crossing into tarot, or they also do tarot, I have no idea. But I did watch their reviews and they were quite positive, and I enjoyed watching it. And I think it was based upon their reviews that I actually bought the deck to try out. So I do really, really love it when, you know, we have a tarot community where where other YouTubers can help us make the decision, right? So yeah, I really, really like the deck in that sense. And I don't know where it will sit in my collection in the future. Maybe it's a deck to have for reasons and seasons. Maybe I don't need it forever. I don't know. But I would definitely, if you're sitting on the fence and you want to give it a try, I would recommend it. And I don't think you need to save it for some like dark period of time. You can use this in the summer. It's fine. It's an all year round deck. So thank you for joining me today, and I will be seeing you soon next week. Have a nice day. Bye.